Morning, everyone. It's Tuesday morning, February 23rd at 10:18, I guess, or 17, but a little bit after, quarter after. Want to welcome everyone to the meeting. Our first item of business this morning is hopefully to wrap up draft number 21-0377, dealing with food residuals on farms for composting. We've been through the bill several times, and we have Kelly, I guess, with us this morning from the Legislative Council. And Kelly, I don't know if we really need, does any of the committee members, Michael's with us as well. So that'll be easier, because if you made some changes, I believe, Michael, and maybe we could run through those changes, and if somebody on the committee wants to go back and go all through the bill again, we can do that. But we've done, I think we've gone through it quite a few times with the updates from Carrie and Kathy Jameson. And so Michael, did you have proposed changes that you should bring to our attention?
Well, we last week discussed some consensus language between the Agency of Natural Resources and the Agency of Ag regarding a change to the definition of soil amendment that would clarify that ANR was going to retain jurisdiction over certain products. Apparently, I heard from Kathy Jameson this morning, the language is not exactly as they would prefer. And so they are recommending a slight change to that language. I can walk through that now, or Kathy just popped up if you want her to talk to what she would like to change.
That would probably be most helpful for the committee, and you're going to be listening, so we know what section and what words or what, So Kathy, welcome this morning, and what could you fill us in on the proposed wording change?
Sure. For the record, Kathy Jameson, Solid Waste Program Manager at ANR. So last week we had a version of the bill, and in that the definition of soil amendment already had a sentence included about what we call exceptional quality biosolids, that stated that they would be considered soil amendments when used for the marketed or distribution as an agricultural commodity. I don't have quite the words correctly, but basically that sentence was already in there. Last, you might recall, ANR was asking for a similar sentence for compost products that are under their jurisdiction of the solid waste management rules for the same reasons. We are fine with those materials being regulated by Agency of Ag when they're used in agriculture, but there could be cases where those materials are used outside of agriculture that should remain under ANR.
So it would just match ag language with their products for ag, and your match your products that you use at ANR.
Right. So our understanding is the definition of a soil amendment would be clear that when it deals with EQ biosolids or compost products under the solid waste rules, that it applies when marketed or distributed for use in the of an agricultural commodity.
Um,
We want it both in there.
That would
And
be,
we only have one or the other in either version.
would that be, like last week, we talked about using this product to cover a landfill or something like
Yeah.
that?
Landfill, industrial site, public
Yeah.
works, non-agricultural uses. And
Yeah,
we assumed both would be in the definition, both meaning both exceptional quality biosolids and compost products under the jurisdiction of the solid waste rule.
yeah. Michael, could that be added, in the same section, or would you move it
Yeah,
to?
it's adding 4 words.
And
So it's not
Yeah.
difficult.
what section would we add that to, Michael?
In the bill that you have on your website, I believe it's page 34. And it is subdivision 19.
Okay, committee, do you have an issue with adding that clarifying language, Chris?
I just want to make sure that this continues the harmony and that Carrie is all fine with that. I assume he is, but.
Yes,
Yeah,
thanks, Chris. That is what we agreed to last week. It just got lost in the write-up. We're good.
We're gonna have to start putting flags on that stuff so we don't lose it. So is the rest of the committee agreeable with making that change? I
Yep.
see heads nodding, and so were there any other issues, Michael?
So Kelly and I made a few conforming changes that we ran by Carrie. Basically, they were just making sure that the terms of use were consistent throughout. But in reviewing the consistency of terms, Kelly raised a question that I'd like her to pose to you all about the scope of regulation over, in particular, soil amendments, and whether or not there should be a limit on that. So Kelly, why don't you pose that question?
Sure. Thanks, Michael. So just in reviewing the language and recalling the testimony that we had or the questions that were raised last Friday about how this would interact with the original composting portion of the draft bill, I was looking through the definitions with Michael, and it appears to me on my reading that the definition of distribute, as well as distributor and related use, are quite broad in this current bill, with distribute meaning, and this is on page 30, lines 15 through 18. The definition in the current draft is distribute means to import, consign, manufacture, produce, compound, mix, or blend fertilizer, or to offer for sale, sell, barter, or otherwise supply or apply fertilizer, a biostimulant, a plant amendment, a soil amendment, or lime in this state. And distribute shall include online sales. So the question that I'm raising that Michael is referencing is around the word apply in the definition of distribute. So as it's currently drafted, this could be read to include the application of soil amendments, and there's not currently a de minimis exception or a small quantities exception. So the scope of distribute is quite broad, which means that even small amounts of soil amendment could potentially fall within the registration and regulation requirements of this draft.
So maybe Carrie,
He's still up for reporting this section?
where it is, Anthony. It's page 34.
No, you
sub-
want to look at page 30 and you
30.
want to look at line 15, subdivision 4. And Kelly, you were breaking up a little bit and so the question really is whether or not you want the full agency jurisdiction to apply to application of fertilizer. I think because this is really regulation of the commercial distribution, you could get rid of or apply. It's because this is about the sale, right? It's about the registration of products for sale on the state. It's really not about
Apply.
application. Yes, the product will be applied, but that's going to be regulated elsewhere. This is about registering the products and making sure that they are what they say they are on the label. So I kind of wanted to run that by Carrie. I don't think you need a de minimis. I think you could just get rid of or apply.
Would that work, Carrie?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. It is. I'm not positive if that language was already in the fertilizer chapter, but
It was.
yeah, I thought so. And it distribute, apply or sell, it really it is more broad than it needs to be, Mike. We
Right.
don't need the application piece, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
And you don't want to get into the de minimis issue because Carl is literally selling lunch bags of compost for like $75, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
You want to regulate that. So you don't want to get into that de minimis issue.
No, and the application, I think with fertilizer, for instance, you'll hire a commercial applicator to come and pull a tote around your field and that applies, but we don't, once you've purchased the product, if the gardener, grower,
Right.
golf course superintendent is making the application themselves, but that's not who we're looking to regulate.
Right. And if they're doing commercial stuff, they're supposed to be certified and the fertilizer that the residentials are going to be applying can't have a substantial amount of phosphorus in it.
Correct.
And so you're addressing, you don't have any of the water quality issues. Plus there's the RAPs about distance and application from water. So I don't think you need apply in this definition of distribute.
I would agree. Thank you.
And what we have as a committee have heard, these commercial applicators, they run by satellite and they only apply according to the soil tests that farmers and landowners have on their land. So, the application is all over the place depending on what the soils require. And it's all, I doubt if everybody is automatic to that yet, but that's a direction that we've heard that all the applicators are going to, is this automatic type application system that runs by satellite. So if you need 200 pounds to the acre or 100 pounds, it automatically switches in the machine. Chris, you had a question?
I just struggling to follow all the pieces here. So part of the first section around on-farm compost is that those farmers have to apply half of what they make to their own land, or they can only sell about half. So I just want to make sure, I want to understand how that fits in here, where we're talking about applying sort of external soil amendments versus in this case, we've also said compost is becoming a soil amendment. Can we make sure that that's all jiving well?
Sure. So the first part is really about retaining the jurisdiction of the agency of ag over those operations, right? And to do that, they have to have the threshold limits on what they use on their own farm. Now, the way that this is drafted right now with the or apply, there's arguably the agency's jurisdiction over anyone's application of that soil amendment, right? Anyone, not just these farmers that are being regulated under Part 1. But the chapter 28 on fertilizer and lime, and now on plant amendments and soil amendments, that's about regulating commercial products and sale, right? So if those farmers under Part 1 are going to start selling their compost in commerce, right, they're going to need to start complying with this law if they're not already complying with it. So that's the interplay, right? It doesn't affect the regulation of whether or not they are farming. It will affect the regulation of whether their product needs to be registered and regulated by the agency when they sell it in commerce.
So as soon as they start they in the chicken scenario, they're using, let's just assume they're using all of that on farm. But the moment a farmer decides to package, in some sense, compost or topsoil that they've made through their compost, then they're registering under this chapter, right, and they have to comply.
If they're going to offer for sale, sell, barter, or otherwise supply that soil amendment in the state, they need to register the product with the Agency of Agriculture.
And I see rural Vermont, Caroline's here. Caroline, is that a surprise to people, or I think you guys reviewed this, so I just want to make sure that's what you're all understanding.
Yes, no, we reviewed this, Chris. Thank you for your question. And we had a little bit of a conversation about the fact that the registration fee will apply for each product and not just once per farm. So the farmers I'm working with are aware of that.
Yeah. So, Carrie, did you have a question?
Just that, that apply was in the chapter before. And I think when we've expanded the definition, I think that was a great catch by Mike and Kelly that
Kelly caught it.
Thank you, Kelly. Apply really doesn't belong there. If somebody's making compost, not moving it off their farm, but still applying it to their land, that's not who we're after.
Yeah. Yep. Anthony?
Excuse me, I want to back up a minute to what we just talked about. If I'm a farmer and I'm doing composting on my farm, once I begin to sell some of it into the marketplace, I have to register. Does that mean I also have to comply with all those parts about registration around labeling and branding and all that other stuff?
Well, wouldn't it pretty much be one label? I mean, your compost isn't going to be changing. And if you had to bag it, or if you took it in bulk, you would have your, I guess, a certain ingredients or whatever it is. What's that label going to look like, Carrie?
So we've got it all in one chapter, but when it's a fertilizer or a lime, it's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium.
No, we want to know about compost.
Yep. It's whatever the composter chooses to guarantee, and as well as contact information.
So it would be a pretty simple label.
Yes. Yep.
Question?
It,
Michael?
if it's in bulk, it's a written or printed form, and it's going to include the weight, the name of the product, the purpose, directions for application, and guaranteed analysis, and then the contact information. So basically, you're giving them an invoice, right?
Well,
and-
yeah, I would think.
So for that bulk shipment, it's basically an invoice with what the product is, its name. The only thing that would be different from a traditional invoice is it's going to have directions for application.
Well, I don't know how you could put directions for applications on because everybody's soil's different, and you might have to put 300 pounds on 1 acre and 500 on another, depending on your soil type. So I'm wondering about if that, unless I'm messed up, how you're gonna put directions for application on. Carrie?
There already are directions for application on a lot of the compost products. They say add one, if it's a garden bed, a home garden bed, they say add 1 to 2 inches of compost to the top of your topsoil and turn it in. And that's just so you're not going to burn the plant and other things. There already are sort of directions for use on these products when they do come bagged and tagged.
Yeah, and I literally looked up a couple of different products, and it's what Carrie said: spread up to 2 inches under the tree or shrub, turn in. That's basically what Carrie just said.
Pretty straightforward, simple stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that could go on the invoice, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anthony?
So I don't mean to sound so dumb about this, but they also have to provide an analysis of what's in their compost, the nitrogen levels and that kind of stuff. And I'm wondering where they get that information from. How do they go about determining that?
They only need to provide that if they're going to guarantee that. Right?
Correct.
And so if they're not guaranteeing or labeling their product as contains 25% X, then they don't need to provide a guaranteed analysis. And
Okay.
and if they are guaranteeing it, then you want them to provide an analysis, and I think you would want them to provide an analysis so that the consumer can rely on them what they're buying as a product.
Sure.
Other questions, in regards to any part of the bill? Mike, Chris?
Well, my question's not about the language, so I don't want to cut that off, but when we're ready for a different track.
Well, I think if everybody is happy with those updates, Michael, when could you or Kelly get those changes made?
I'm making them right now.
Oh, good. Because it'd be nice to get this thing going. And because we've got to get the bill printed, and then it's got to go to Chris. But if he's got part of this week and then all of the week after we come back, I would hope that he could get it down to finance, by the end of the week we're back from town meeting. Chris, go ahead. You got a question or?
Well, it's the same question I've had before, but because we're about to vote on this, it's for Kathy and Carrie. And I just want assurance that when you go to other rooms in the State House, virtual or otherwise, you'll be comfortable telling those our colleagues that both agencies are comfortable with the compromise we've struck here.
And don't both speak at once, we want to get it very clear. No,
Right.
it's very important that we have that assurance, because it'll mess the bill up again, and then we'll be back working on it again. And so if you two are in agreement, and we can go to natural resources and get the same input from you folks as we have now in here, it'll work.
Mhm.
It'll work, I think.
Right. So as long as those 4 words are inserted in the soil amendment definition, we will be in agreement with the bill.
Yeah, thank you. That's good. And Michael, you can send Kathy a copy of with that change.
Okay, I'll send it to them now. And everybody can kumbaya.
Michael, are you changing the draft number on it?
I'm changing it to 2.2 with today's date and a 10:43 a.m. timestamp.
And Carrie, you're shaking your head, but I can't tell this far away if it's up and down or side to side. So we'd like to hear it on the record.
Very good, very good. Yes, this is a document that's gone through a lot of push and pull, and both agencies are in agreement.
Yeah, that sounds good. Anthony?
Yeah, I have a less controversial question. Going back to the beginning of the bill, on section 7 on page 11, I think it is, it's about the application of solid waste management rules. Am I right and correct in thinking that until the ag department develops rules for the composting operations, that they will still be under the natural A&R rules? Is that what that's saying?
If it's not used on agricultural land, and like landfills, brownfields, if it's used there, then A&R would deal with it. If it's used on agricultural land, then Carrie, I believe, would, or the ag agency, that's the way I understand it. And Kathy, do you have something to say?
Well, probably the same thing Mr. O'Grady is going to say, so I'll let him do it.
So, Senator Starr, you're correct. In the long term, that differentiation is going to be there, but in the short term, prior to the Agency of Agriculture adopting rules, you want to have some standards that are going to be applied to these facilities. And in that interim, the Agency of Agriculture is going to apply the A&R composting solid waste rule standards to these facilities. So they will still have to follow a standard. They're not going to be unregulated until the Agency of Ag adopts the rules. But so that is basically what that transition section is intended to do.
So will they have to get the permits and that kind of stuff, or they just have to?
No, they're not going to have to get the permit. They're just going to have to meet the standards.
It's like they're doing right today until the ag agency gets their rules done. They'd be under the same jurisdiction as of today. And then it would switch over to the new law with the rules drafted and ready to go.
Right.
So are we all pretty satisfied? Caroline, are you all set with your crew?
Yes, Senator Starr, thank you for the question. I think we would very much appreciate the bill moving forward like this.
Yeah. So are we, do you feel comfortable moving the bill with Michael's changes and updates, and thanks Kelly for your input on this as well. Been helpful. If you guys, if you're all set, somebody want to make a motion to adopt this new draft?
So moved.
So it's been moved to adopt the latest draft, which should have a time on it at 10:43, I believe I heard Michael say. Is there a second to that?
Second.
It has been seconded. Any other questions or discussion? If not, Corey, you wanna call the roll?
Yeah, Senator Colomar,
Yes.
Senator Parent, yes. Senator Pearson,
Yes.
Senator Polina,
Yes.
and Senator Starr.
Yes.
And
And-
is Anthony reporting the bill?
Anthony and Chris.
Okay.
Yeah, how does that work? Do we both own it, or do we just informally divide that?
Well, the way we talked last week, Anthony would do the first part and you would do the new part, Chris.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
But you guys divide it up any way you want. You can give Anthony the whole thing. You're vice chair, so you can give him the
Power play.
all except for the enactment date. No, you guys go ahead and divide it up, wherever you're comfortable splitting it, I think would
Now
be fine.
That makes sense. So, but I assume Anthony will actually file it and take care of that because he's kind of the lead, but
Yeah,
happy to do whatever anybody needs.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a committee bill, so the chair in this remote age needs to send a copy of it to drafting operations with the committee vote attached to that email.
how the heck do you do that when you're?
I just
I'll-
emailed you and Linda a copy of it. And so you just need to forward that to drafting operations, and I will do that for you if you would like.
Well, I think that would be most helpful. I'd like to drive it down, but I don't know when I do that.
So
No,
I will do that. I will CC you on the email, and if Nadine wants your direct email, I will let you know.
yeah, thanks, Michael. That's great help. Well, let's hope and pray that we can get our composting bill done this year. So I think we have a good bill. Both agencies are happy, and the farmers are happy, and we're happy. So how much more could you ask for, right? Anyways, Kathy, thanks for all
Yep.
your help, and Carrie and Kelly, thanks for hanging in there with us. We get a little bit off base sometimes. And Carrie, thanks a lot. And I guess we'll move on to our school lunch bill.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Kathy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Thanks.
told Peter, Kathy, I don't know if you can hear me. I told Peter the other day they ought to give you a raise in pay. You were working awful hard to get a compromise here, and so
Happy
appreciate
to-
that.
Yep, happy to do so. Glad it all worked out. So thank you for,
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Linda, do we have Jim with us and the food security, food lunch people?
They're scheduled to come at 10. I just emailed Jim Damaris and asked him if he could come now.
What, I thought they were scheduled for
For 11. 11.
Yeah,
And we got a slightly simplified draft. I don't know, Mr. Chair, if you didn't sign off on that, but I asked Jim to get the language clear.
I saw your email and hopefully we got the right draft.
Well,
Is it
listen,
four-
anytime we make a bill simpler, I figure we might be on the right track.
Oh, definitely. Is it 4.1?
No, it's 7.1. It's on the webpage.
Where would we find that?
You would find that under today's date with James Demaris' name under your committee documents.
So Michael sent that clean draft, so we got that.
Yeah, I just scanned in the record and I'll email over to you shortly.
Thank you.
You let Jim in?
Yeah, hang on.
I got it, Linda.
Boy, that chicken bill really grew this year, didn't it?
Yeah, quite a
50
harvest.
50 pages.
Yeah.
Yeah, golly.
A lot of
Okay.
complying. What do we call those? Complying language? What's the term of art?
Conforming.
Conforming. Oh yeah, they just skip over this. It's just conforming language.
Yeah. Brian?
Thanks, Bobby. I had a question from somebody, I can't remember who asked me, about pigs. They're
About
no
what?
longer allowed to eat stuff without paying a fee. ANR, I think, is responsible for that change. I know Casella charges about $2 a gallon for feed for pigs. And it's a change from what was in place where they could just take scraps from anybody and feed them. But ANR,
No,
I-
not for hogs. I
Yeah,
thought
not,
you had
not
to
for
cook
hogs.
it.
oh,
Right. That's exactly correct. Food residuals can't be fed to swine directly. Food Safety Modernization Act and actually previous FDA statute and rule required that the food residuals be treated in order to eliminate vectors that can be
So it's-
passed to
it's business
humans.
stuff, not necessarily just ANR, right?
Yes, it's actually
And that's
it's a federal law.
Okay, thank you.
And I think, Brian, you cook that, you have to bring it to a certain temperature, I believe. And so if you need to get back to your constituent, Michael probably help you look that up where it is. And
No, there's no need. I can do it. That must be really delicious when you bring it to a certain temperature.
well, it's all cooked, you know. Yeah, sometimes.
Slightly warmed compost.
Well, good morning, Jim.
Good morning.
I was reading your lips and they weren't very nice words you were saying.
That's not true.
Well, you see, I can't read lips very good. So, Jim, thanks for being with us. We hopefully got Betsy and Faye and Ted Fisher, got a whole crew hopefully with us. So we wanted to go through any changes that you've made since we met last week. And so I guess we'll turn it over to you to go to the changes and updates that been made since we last met, and then we'll have questions.
Okay, sounds good. Linda, can I share the screen?
Yes.
Let's see, is it working now? Yeah, great. Let's see. It's right here. Okay. And can people see this? I can make it a bit bigger.
Yes.
Let's see. A bit bigger, maybe. There we go. Okay. Okay, so good morning. For the record, Jim Damery, Village Council. We are walking through your draft 7.1 of your community bill on school food programs. Comments in yellow are the ones I made from your last committee meeting. And then the ones in blue are ones that came after that from Betsy Rosenbluth. So that's how it's done. There's one comment I didn't take from Betsy. I'll explain why when we go through it. And let's see where they are. Okay. Okay. So what the first changes are in the from Betsy, and we're in section 1264A, which is the new section on locally produced foods. States the goal, that's unchanged. And then sorry, I'm pausing because, yeah. So Betsy struck out this language here. I haven't put in blue. I just wanted to highlight for you. Remember that there were two parts of the grant program. Initially, it was based on the local definition of locally produced foods. In year one, you would get a grant based on that definition. And then in future years, you would get the grant based upon the definition provided in this statute. What Betsy has done is take it out the first year of grant in terms of having it based upon the school district's own definition of locally produced foods.
Wow.
So you'll see a lot of deletion coming out. Sorry?
So that could change from school to school in the same district if that language stays, right?
This language here,
or is it supervision?
So let me answer that question if I could, so sorry, just 1 second. So you'll see a lot of strikeouts of that first year grant program, and what comes in its place is using the state definition right away from the first year. The reason, so she has struck this language here about the definition that school boards have the discretion, but I think that has to stay. I haven't actually taken this out in blue yet because down here it's saying that there's an annual report that has to be done by the school districts, and it's based on its local definition. So even though you're not providing grant funding based on this definition, you're still getting a report every year based on their local definition. So I'm questioning whether we should take this language out here. Maybe we should come back to that. And going on, this is strikeout from Betsy.
Hold on, if we could, Jim, just
yeah.
Setting aside the report and whether or not we need to kind of keep it in there for a legacy period. And if we do, maybe we could sunset that. But my question is, I think this makes sense to me to just shift to one definition rather than have a couple of years here where it's definition A and then we shift to B. I want it to be simple. My question though is maybe for others on the call, there are a bunch of schools that are engaged in this already, and we don't want to exclude them from getting the incentive. We want to say thank you for your many works of actually buying and supporting local ag. And so does that present a complication if we immediately shift to the definition? What, could anyone comment on that? Does my question make sense?
Well, maybe Betsy could fill us in on, I mean, Betsy, are you on?
Yes, I am. Mhm. So for the record, my name is Betsy Rosenbluth. I'm the project director of Vermont Feed at Shelburne Farms and coordinator of the Vermont Farm to School Network. So I was trying to make some suggestions to simplify the program by eliminating the pre-qualifying round, which school boards were using their own definition of local. But then in order to get reimbursed, you needed to use the state definition. And I was trying to minimize any confusion so that if schools continued to use the school board definition for reimbursement, they weren't surprised when, if they weren't able to meet that expectation. I have no problem with the school board having a definition of local that they're using to just report annually to AOE on their estimate. But maybe it just needs to be more attached to that reporting as opposed to asking for two different definitions in 2 different years.
Yeah, I think that would be very confusing having, they go through the whole year, do their reporting, get to the end, and then the state says, well, you aren't conforming to our definition. I think that ought to be clarified and straightened out, because it's just going to get a lot of people upset, or it could get a lot of people upset having 2 definitions.
Yeah, and I think there's a way to make it clear. I know that it's important that in general, the definition of local rests with the school board. I know AOE and Rosie could probably speak to that, but when we're talking specifically about a granting program with specific criteria, we want to make sure, as you say, Senator Starr, that it's very clear. And even though we eliminate the pre-qualifying round, we still have a tiered system of reimbursement. So Senator Pearson, I'm still hoping that many schools will be able to reach 15% in that first year. We have a pretty nice broad definition of local and still be able to achieve an incentive grant. And we'll be working hard to support them where we can to help make that happen.
Actually, it's a good point. I don't know if Abby or somebody's on here, but the ag agency's definition is actually most of the state, right? Whereas the older definition had a mileage radius, which would, for most people, be more restrictive. So I think that's fair to say.
Is there somebody on from ag that could clarify Chris's question? Rosie, are you on this morning?
I'm here, and I actually I want to mention that I've reviewed Betsy's proposed changes, and I don't actually think that this simplifies things for us. The first year that was previously in here actually is a much easier grant to implement. It's kind of the low-hanging fruit. It rewards folks who are already doing this work, and all AOE has to review is an attestation from the business manager that they have done these 4 things that would, get them a little bit of the way to purchasing local. By striking that first year and implementing the future grant program a year earlier, you're actually adding a lot more complicated work for us this coming year, rather than giving us the year to ease into it.
Yeah.
And I think the way that the definition stuff is written here, in that first year, it's giving folks a reward for the work they're already doing. I don't have a problem kind of managing the way that the definition is written here. So I don't think there's really a whole lot of need to mess with this. And I don't think it makes things simpler for us. And I don't think it makes things simpler for the schools either.
So we ought to leave the language in that we have in the draft then.
Yeah.
That's what you're suggesting? Not delete, this report shall include school district's budget for.
So this particular language, starting on line 3 here, I could take that or leave it. The schools already report this information to us in an annual financial report. So we're going to collect it whether you tell us to collect it or not.
So that
so
can go and you're happy.
This particular line, the sentence starting on line 3 could go or could stay, and it doesn't matter either way.
Committee, you want to strike line 3, 4, and a little bit of 5? That agreeable with the committee?
Sure.
Okay, so
Yeah,
Jim will.
Well, I just want to make sure I'm fine striking it, but are we striking it from current law? Because that's not what Rosie wants.
Well, this is language we added to the bill, isn't it, Rosie?
Yeah, we collect the financial report per USDA regulations, not per Vermont statute.
Thank you.
So it might be helpful to, sorry.
Their question? Jim?
Not a question. No, I was going to try to give you context. Because a lot of this is being struck, and this is what Rosie's really talking about down here. So I was going to show you what is proposed to be struck below here. When you're ready.
Line 9, is that where you are, Jim?
Yeah. So what Barbara did was she struck out the entire first year grant process. So that's the strikeout you're seeing beginning on line 9. So first year had a requirement that to be eligible for the grant, the SU had to develop a purchasing plan. There's an individual as a coordinator, develop a process for tracking purchase of locally produced foods and comply with the reporting requirement. So all of these would be struck under Barbara's version because the whole first year grant process is gone, as well as lines 20 and 21. And then she would go right to, and all of this gets struck. She would go right to here, which is basically moving up the use of the state definition. So in the first year, you're using the state definition and getting rid of this whole first year process. So all of these strike throughs are for that purpose.
I thought we wanted to use the first year language. I thought we wanted to keep that in there. Rosie, didn't you say that you'd like to keep the first year's language in the draft?
The first year, it's the first year grant program is really the grant program that AOE had come back to you and suggested was the best way of achieving your goals last year with the least amount of administrative burden. So these are the things, these 4 things are things that we think would set a school up for success in terms of local purchasing. Many schools have already done these things, so it would reward those schools who have already done these things. And it's a very simple grant for us to review. So my preference would be that for school year 22, which is going to be kind of a crazy school year, this would be much simpler to implement than moving right into the regular grant that you've got later on.
Yeah, that's what I thought you'd said. So what's wrong with what's wrong with keeping that language in if it's going to be easier for Ed to manage this thing and to get it off to a good start, not screw our local school districts up with a new system right off quick. why not leave that language in?
Mr. Chair, I think it's fine. You know, again, that was Betsy's suggestion, but I do have a question for Jim. And maybe Rosie, is the way, if we leave, assuming we leave that language in, does that mean that every school that's year one? So basically we push all the schools that are easily complying already, they have to wait a year, essentially. Is that accurate? Like there's no stepping through that first year process if you're well underway and jumping in to get your 20 cents. Is that accurate?
Yes, the first year you get 15 cents for doing this basic stuff. And then the subsequent years you do move to the next round.
So for some of our schools that are well underway, that'll be frustrating, but what we gain is that it's easier for you and it's easier for a lot more schools to come in.
And easier for the ones that are already doing it to have to jump through hoops to create or build a new type reporting system. That's the way I thought.
Well, some of the schools that are well underway would just as soon jump and get 25 cents a meal, probably, but we're going to slow them down, but that's okay. I mean, this is you know, a compromise all around.
Yep. So are we good? We'll leave that language in then. Agreeable? Yep. Okay, Jim?
Yep, that's fine. Okay,
Yep.
so this stuff would not be taken out. So I'm going to keep going to where there are other changes. So yellow changes are the ones that came out of your committee discussion last week. So you asked for language that a vendor which contracts with the SU to supply food products are certified to the SU, which of the food products supplied meet the definition of local to Vermont, taking into account the exclusions above, and those exclusions are up here. Okay, should I move on?
Yep.
Okay.
So are we all set with that yellow language, guys? Yep.
I think so. Yep.
Okay, Jim.
And then this change to move up the date by a month. I'm on lines 13 and 14. These came from Betsy again, so I'm not sure if you want these changes, but they're here.
Yeah, Rosie, does that date change make any difference to the Department of Ed?
It's somewhat helpful. It just gives us a little bit more time to process the payment. So.
Yeah, so that's agreeable with everybody?
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And then going on further, I bracketed the percentages because we were thinking of the steps further. So that's been bracketed, and that's been bracketed. Should I pause there? You were talking last week about
what we had last year, right?
The 15%.
Yeah, I think you were worried last time about baked goods and how they come into this definition.
Yeah.
Right, and so you wanted to bracket this in case you wanted to increase these percentages a bit further.
This is all on baked goods.
Well, I'm just reflecting what I think you talked about last time. I think the conversation went from recognizing that the definition excludes the products, and you talked a lot about baked goods and how they would fit within that definition.
Yeah.
And that led to a conversation about bracketing these percentages here. I think you were thinking you might want to increase them to make them a little tougher to meet, but I might be misrecalling what you said.
Chris?
If I remember, the discussion was like around my neighbor Coffee Cup Bakery, which supplies probably a lot of buns to schools, but doesn't use local ingredients. And so do we do we want to allow them because they're a local processor? But if we do, we'd have to acknowledge that then these percentages are very easy to meet and crank them up. And I don't know the right answer.
Well-
I'd rather they use Coffee Cup than, you know, some out-of-state producer, but it does not honor our local, you know, ag motivation, you know, principle. And I just don't know what the right solution is. Maybe others, Betsy and others would have ideas, but I don't know.
We
Well-
haven't referenced processors anywhere else, right? We haven't referenced processors.
Processing.
Yeah, like a product that's Vermont grown as opposed to Vermont processed.
That is part of the non-BSA, that's part of the local to Vermont definition. That includes the processed food. I have to find that for you.
So Chris, you haven't talked with anyone like your neighbor to see what they use for ingredients? You know, what the percentage is or anything?
No, I'm afraid to go down there. I'll walk away with dozens of donuts that they waft into my neighborhood, and when we're out in the backyard, all the kids want donuts.
They make the best donuts in Vermont.
Absolutely, they do. I don't believe they are, you know, trying or aiming to use Vermont raw products, but it would help me if Jim, if you could get us that definition so we have a better grounding of what we're talking about.
I can tell you, I can read it to you right now if you like. That's the processed food definition from the local to Vermont definition in section 2465A of Title IX. And that reads, processed food means any food other than a raw agricultural product, and it includes a raw agricultural product that has been subject to processing, such as canning, cooking, dehydrating, milling, or the addition of other ingredients. Processed food includes dairy, meat, maple products, beverages, fruit, or vegetables that have been subject to processing, baked, or modified into a value-added or unique food product.
That's it?
That's it.
So if you're baking something that has no local ingredients, you're out.
Right, seems like it.
See, and that might be good if you lived in a big state where these products are readily available. But in a small state like ours, there's certain products you have to import to make, you know, good. We got somebody got not muted or something. But it's too bad we couldn't, have a percentage in there or something, some kind of a language. We don't want to put people out of work. If in Coffee Cup, most of our local distributors have a very good distribution system set up. So, once they manufacture something, it's delivered fresh to our schools and our hot lunch programs. And we don't want to discourage that, I wouldn't think. So I don't know if
Betsy may have a solution, or she has a comment, I believe.
Yeah, thank you. That is the definition of processed food. So processed food would have to have a majority of Vermont ingredients. But then there's another category that specifically calls out bakery products, beverages, and unique food products. And those you can either have a majority of Vermont products or also in place of that, be headquartered and do the actual processing in the state of Vermont for those products. And I think the idea was for processed product that it's difficult to get the majority of ingredients locally, that being headquartered and processed in the state would also qualify. And so, for example, Coffee Cup, Red Hen, I assume maybe King Arthur Flour, companies like that that aren't using a majority of Vermont grain, but are Vermont companies headquartered and processed in the state, they would be eligible.
Yeah.
I did get some data from a couple school districts a few minutes ago that, you know, about bakery products right now, like the frozen bakery products that are on the truck from Reinhardt make up maybe 8% of a couple of these districts. So we were thinking it was closer to 15% already, but it's about 8%.
So should we lower, do we need to play with that number?
I think the 15, 20, 25 is a really nice tiered approach. And I think that it's really, we could talk to more of the food service directors about bakery products. It just depends on the outcome. You know, if you're comfortable in that percentage coming from qualifying for the grants that don't necessarily benefit Vermont producers and farmers, but do provide benefit for using Vermont companies, then you would just let the definite, you don't need to exclude that product, bakery and unique food products.
Well, it's I think it's very important that we emphasize Vermont products, but we certainly don't want to penalize a Vermont company that can't get those products locally and have them lose business. We're, you know, trying to create jobs and things, and so if what we have will work through this other definition, personally, I think it would be good to leave it like it is, and then try to work up, and maybe local people would start making more jellies or something that, you know, they can buy locally. But Anthony, do you have your little hand up? Did you have a question?
No, no, no.
Oh,
It's
I
a tricky-
see your little yellow, or maybe that's Rosie's hand.
Yeah, Rosie.
Yeah, so I think Senator Starr, to do what you want to do, Jim, I don't know if you'd mind scrolling up a little bit to where you inserted the language saying they have to attest, the producer needs to attest that they meet the Vermont definition of local. So by inserting this, you've basically kind of incorporated that Vermont definition of local. But if you scroll up to A there, whoops, oh, sorry, down a little bit now. Just about at the top of the page there. So you'd want to strike this exclusion of unique food products right here, number 2. And that would accomplish what you're looking for, Senator Starr. It would put
that little number 2L.
Yep. So it would put the onus on the producer to say we meet Vermont's definition of local. Vermont's definition of local allows for, as Betsy was describing, those producers who are headquartered here. And so you would be incorporating those products into the amount that you're willing to give the incentive for.
And that, would that fit into all of your regulations, and so they would qualify?
Yeah, the problem with our regulations is that our regulations say that if a school is going to give a geographic preference for a certain product, they need to define local for themselves in terms of what they're giving the geographic preference for. But you're not getting down into that piece of things here. So it's okay for you to use the Vermont definition of local to say, we're going to give you some extra money if you do this. If you were to get much more detailed and saying, the school needs to give a 10% geographic preference for foods that are grown in Vermont, or that, the school needs to purchase at least, this amount of local food, as meets our definition, period, not to get this incentive, that would be a problem. But the way that this is written, it's okay.
So committee, what do you think about striking that little number 2? 2 little.
Well, go ahead, Ann.
Well, I just want to make sure you know what that means. It means that we would be allowing food that's processed in Vermont using not Vermont ingredients, like Coffee Cup would be counted as local because it's a local company that's creating a product here in Vermont, even though they're not using Vermont products, Vermont raw products. That's what we're talking about doing. I'm not taking a position at this moment, but that would really open the door to, I think, those percentages would be a heck of a lot easier to reach. And I hate to see people relying on Coffee Cup Bakery to reach their limit to qualify, as opposed to, not feeling that they have to go out of their way to find local products. It's a big difference. I'm not saying yes or no right now. I'm just saying it's really big. I think it's a big change.
Our school, the ladies there make their own breads and stuff. They don't even, buy bread from outside. They bake their own early in the morning, and it's fresh every day or every other day or something. But I know they make their own bread, and I don't know if they use King Arthur flour, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was available. But I don't want to chase. You remember a few years ago, Bowes went to packaging spaghetti sauce, and what a heck of a time the AG's office gave them over. I don't know, they had to hire a bottler over in New York or something, and gave them a heck of a hard time. And I don't even know if they're still around, but I remember reading about that, and I thought it was kind of a messed up deal. But Chris?
I think they are still in Milton. But Betsy, how does this work now? I mean, I know we haven't been worried about what percent people get, but people have been reporting their percentages. So today, and we keep picking on Coffee Cup, but if the school uses Coffee Cup, does that count today as a local product?
I would think.
Well, each school is just defining local for themselves. I'd be surprised if schools are thinking that Coffee Cup product is local, but I don't know that. There's no official definition. So part of this legislation is create some consistency by using the state definition. I don't think it changes how they buy. I don't think it really changes Coffee Cup bidding on the bakery. They had the contract, then they didn't bid the last round. And I think it's Reinhardt's frozen product. I think they're interested in bidding this round. So I don't think the incentive necessarily influences that, but I think it does, as Senator Polino said, it makes up, a certain percentage of the schools purchasing that would help them be eligible for the grants.
And well, personally, I just soon get rid of that little Rosie, she seemed to think we could get rid of that little double I's there and it would still work fine.
So I was just saying, Senator, that if you want to do what you had outlined, that's how you would do it. I don't have a particular preference as to whether you include these products or not. That's really a policy call. That's your call to make. But if in order to get to where you said you wanted to go, that's the change that you would need to make.
Well, that was just my opinion. I mean, so, well, what do you want to do with that?
I tend to agree with you, Senator Starr. I think it's tough to say, you know, what defines a Vermont product if it's made in Vermont, with necessarily non-Vermont ingredients. So I think I'd be in favor of getting rid of it. But
well, I just think if the question came up on the floor in regards to this and say we looked into it the way with that in the law, and we said, well, if somebody said, well, how many jobs are we going to lose because of this particular section? And you just said 50 jobs, maybe. I mean, it would be a hard sell. And because we certainly, you know, need the jobs and maybe, you know, we could put something in where you would work out of this so that it would encourage, I don't like using a company name, but Coffee Cup would work toward maybe buying, you know, more local ingredients as they come available, or but I don't think that should probably be in this bill, but that would be something to work toward as we move forward. Chris?
Well, you know, we heard that Coffee Cup gets the bids already, so they're just competing. So I don't think we're going to make it harder for them to compete either way. So just in terms of jobs, that doesn't seem like a concern to me. But I'm happy striking it for now. And you know, this may be something that people will keep an eye on.
Yep.
And I do want us to be grounded in helping farmers.
Yep.
But right after that would be local jobs. So I think, you know, to the extent this makes it a little bit easier for our schools to succeed, then that's probably not a bad strategy.
Well, and we can always get Heather Darby back in and have her plant more wheat and rye and stuff, but she testified out it was a slow process and that we have trouble competing, growing our own grains like that against those guys from the West. But no, I think that's a wise choice. So is the committee in agreement with striking the two little I's there? Sounded
I'm
like
good.
it.
Yep, me too.
So Jim will strike out that number 4,
Yeah.
line 4.
Yep, we got it.
Yep. And renumber fluid milk.
Yep.
Okay, want to roll ahead?
Yeah, roll ahead. So we're keeping these bracketed percentages the same, right? 15, 20, 25.
That good, guys? Because I didn't hear that very well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think so.
Okay. All right. So then the comment that Rosie made last time was that for the applications covering the 2021 school year, meals served through the summer meal service program should be counted. So that language has been included here.
Jim, just a note,
That's-
it's the summer food service program.
Yeah, for this coming summer, right, Rosie?
This language is fine. It's just that the name of the program is summer food service program
Summer
capitalized.
food service.
And this
Yep.
accomplishes the issue, or this deals with the issue that I flagged for you last time with this particular school year.
Okay, I'll make that change.
Yep.
And then going down further, okay, so this came from Betsy here. So I just wrote a little introduction here. So this says now in order to provide assistance under the locally produced foods section that we just added, the Agency of Education shall collaborate with the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets to, we had this before, promote the local foods program. Now what's new is these two serve as a resource for identifying Vermont products that are eligible for grant funding. And 3, assist with development and assessment of grant program applications.
And so that's the two agencies working together to develop this, right?
Correct. Yep. These two here. Yep.
Yep. Any problem with that language, guys?
Which
No.
committee is gonna, or which agency is to serve and to assist? I'm not clear on that. I know they're supposed to work collaboratively, but you've added a section that has one of them doing it.
Back it up, Jim.
Yeah.
I thought was
Okay,
the Agency of Ed.
At
shall
the Agency of
collaborate,
Education.
But food, ag should have somebody working on that constantly anyways. I bet they do. Chris?
okay.
My question was on the second, can you scroll down, Jim, to the second blue? Was serve as a resource for identifying Vermont products that are eligible for grant funding. It seems like that's really trying to say that help make schools eligible for grant funding, right? The products aren't eligible for grant funding.
To help identify Vermont schools that are
I mean,
eligible.
the idea is that we're helping schools figure out what they can buy.
Yeah,
So I don't know. I mean, it's not a big deal, but I think here it's just the wrong noun. The products aren't eligible for grant funding. Does that make sense, Jim? It's just.
Yeah, what was the sort of the intent was here, whether it's help in determining what's a locally produced product, or is it help with schools?
it's
'Cause I think
products
Rosie-
on this. It is Vermont products that qualifies as school district, right?
That's right. So it's the product, but the product doesn't get a grant. The school gets a grant.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Vermont
can,
that are eligible for school grants, right? School grant funding.
so my only question there goes back to Rosie, who didn't want to be in the position, I think, from her testimony last week of having to decide what products are count or don't count. I'm not sure if this is doing that or not, so I just wanted to flag that question.
I think you already accomplished this above by saying that the producer has to certify. I could take or leave this language. We already work closely with Agency of Ag on this, so it doesn't tell us to do something that we're not already doing. But it doesn't hurt us if it's included in here.
Okay, so let me
If we don't need it, we'll scrap it. So we'll take that out, Jim.
okay. All right, and then keep 3 in. Yep.
Rosie.
Wait, is Rosie saying the whole section's not needed, or number 2 is not needed?
The additions here, 2 and 3.
2 and 3 can go.
I see.
Well, we got rid of 3 lines.
Well, well, Betsy asked for these to be included because the blue language is her suggestion. So maybe we could just understand her logic.
Sure, it was just, there was some concern about administration of the program. These came directly from Abby Willard at the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, who said that they would be happy to assist as well in these 2 ways. They're working right now on a tracking project for local food, so they felt that they would be well versed in that for helping with assessing the applications and reviewing those applications. And although they don't want to take responsibility for certifying the Vermont products, they could certainly be a resource as questions come up, as you said, Senator, that, you know, they're going to be in this in other sectors, not just with schools. So I'm fine if you take it out. I was trying to provide some more assistance to Rosie based on a conversation with the Agency of Agriculture.
Well, so, I mean, if we don't really need it, if the 2 agencies are I mean, they work together and so I just soon take it out. So strike 2 and 3, guys. Is that agreeable?
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
okay. Okay, Jim.
Yep, fine, yep. And then lastly, we have a change here. It was requested by Rosie, I believe. So this is the appropriation to AOE for the grant program. And then there's a $60,000 set aside to retain a contractor. And then now says, or otherwise fund costs associated with the implementation of the grant program.
Rosie, that we haven't gotten to your employee yet, right?
That's in
this
here as
doesn't-
well. So this
Pardon?
language is what I'd asked you to do, and this is great. So I wouldn't have any additions to that.
Because what I have a question in regards to, you know, you said you had a limited service position that was going to run out in July, I believe.
July of 2022.
And what I have spoke with the chair of appropriations, and I'm wondering if we extended that limited service position for 1 more year, would that be adequate to take care of this, help you with this new program?
This particular program has some ongoing, you know, every year somebody's going to have to review the grant applications and, you know, do that checking to ensure that folks have met the requirements. And then there's also the ongoing additional need for under the universal meals portion of this bill. So just extending that limited service position wouldn't help us long-term to manage the additional work that you've put in here.
Well,
and I'm already using that limited service position to do outreach for summer food service program and the child and adult care food program. So that person already has specific responsibilities.
What we were talking about is it's much easier in this time of uncertainty in regards of revenues to extend a limited service position for another year than it is to build it into the base for a permanent additional employee, not knowing what our revenues might be. And so it was sort of our thinking that if we got if we got this extended for 1 year, during that, maybe revenues would pick up, turn around, things would change enough, so then we could make it an additional permanent position. That was the thinking behind that.
So I think Ted would like to say something. I will say that I've told you before that I could implement the work, the child nutrition pieces of the work that's in this bill with the position that you've added in this bill. I would have difficulty implementing this work without that position. And the limited service position that I've already got is already doing work. So while it might assist child nutrition programs long-term to have that extended in terms of our regular work, it wouldn't help us accomplish the work of this bill. But I know, I want to be clear that the agency is not, asking for an additional position, and that I'm just telling you that in order to do the work that you've asked us to do in this bill, we would need that position. I know Ted would like to say something on that as well.
Are you on, Ted?
Good morning. Can you hear me okay, Chair?
Yeah.
Hi, Chair Starr. For the record, I am Ted Fisher from the Vermont Agency of Education. I'm the Director of Communications and Legislative Affairs. And I know we had come in to speak after this conversation on a couple of issues related to data. I just thought I would take an opportunity. Rosie actually just very eloquently said what I was about to say. So I'll just reinforce that and I'm not commenting right now on the agency's position on the bill, because we can get to that in a moment. But if you ask us to do this work, we will need an additional position above and beyond any existing positions we have. I want to be very clear that will be necessary for us to implement the program properly to the committee's intent. And I'll just note that there have been conversations elsewhere in I use air quotes around the term building, as we're all virtual right now, but there have been other conversations around the building, as tends to happen on an annual basis, about the agency's capacity. And we're being very, very clear this year that in terms of adding additional work, we would need additional resources to do that. So extending existing limited services position, or changing, asking us to change within our current structure probably will not allow us to implement the program with this fidelity. So, so there would be a necessity for an additional long-term, not limited service position. And I just want to be clear that we said that in our written testimony, but I just want to be clear on the record that that is something that we would need to, that we need to carry this forward in every conversation with every committee as we go forward. So this isn't workable without that position.
How many employees do you guys have at the present?
The number that's in my head is 167 is the number of positions allocated to the agency. That's not the number of positions that we have. We're down some, as most agencies are, due to the hiring freeze. But we are a lean, mean fighting machine when it comes to the number of roles, and we do a lot with the resources that we have. But there is a limit to the extent that we can take on additional work. And I just will say, our position on the bill is that we're opposed to some of the items in this bill. But to the extent the committee would like to move forward in either case, we feel that we would need additional resources to make the work happen.
Well, why I asked you the question about how many employees you had, I know that you guys, none of the agencies are filling any positions, and I can't imagine how you expect to get the work done without people to do the work. And yet agency after agency comes in. Well, we're down 10, we're down 20, we're down 15, and hell, we're lucky to get any work done at all. And you can't keep doing more work and getting rid of more people. I don't know where the orders are coming from, but I know I'm not shy about asking appropriations to add another person or two if we need them. And I think this school meals, food security is important enough, so we ought to be able to warrant appropriating enough money for an employee to make it all work. But that'll be our battle. You know, in the legislature, we're the ones that appropriate the money. So that'll be up to us. But you guys in the administration have got to get a little stronger spine and start asking for some help as far as I'm concerned. But anyways, let's move on. Where were we, Jim?
We were done.
You're at
was
the
it.
end?
Yep. Yep.
Questions from committee members?
So,
Oh,
Mr. Chair, just on this position, I mean, we're not talking about a new position. We're talking about filling a vacancy, right? For or something from the pool, I'm assuming. So that's a conversation that we're going to have to trust your skills on. And I've heard the legendary finger in approps goes like this. Well, there's just one more thing, right?
well, I mean, I've worked around enough people and had enough employees, so I know what if you have too many, it's just as bad, if not worse, than having not enough. But, you know, working with the folks over there at Ed, they've been overworked. I mean, cutting people for years. And you know, we require a lot of our Ed agency and expect a lot from them, and you have to give them the labor that they need to do the job. I mean, golly. But anyways, Rosie, any of you folks have anything else you want to add to our discussion? No, committee members?
Senator,
Yes.
sorry, Senator, this is Ted Fisher again.
Yeah.
So I myself and two of my colleagues, Jesse Roy and Bob Keeley, came to join you today because we heard through Rosie and through Linda that the committee had some questions about the data questions of this bill. We ended up providing, we didn't think we were going to provide written testimony. We thought we'd make witnesses available to answer some of those questions. But in giving the bill another read, we have provided written testimony, and I understand that your time is short. And so if you'd like us to come back, we'd be happy to do that. But just very quickly off the top, I will say, you know, as we have said in previous years about this topic, we do have some pretty significant concerns about the use of FRL data and making sure that we have a good, the free and reduced lunch data. We need to have a good replacement metric for that before we move through into universal meals. I will just note, because we covered the position, speaking now on behalf of the agency, and this is not a policy. This is not a policy priority for the administration this year. We are very committed to the concept. We support the intent and the concept. We don't know if this is the right year to be doing it. The issues of cost, the numbers we're still seeing are between $40 and $50 million of cost. The concerns that we have as well include using the ed funds in the way that it is currently structured in the bill. We've outlined that in written testimony, but asking school districts to put it into their budget, we're concerned about that because it will make conversations that are often uncomfortable in terms of local education spending. It has the potential to make those more difficult. It also just makes the total, it harder to calculate the total cost of the program from a sort of a spending transparency side of things, and giving you folks information about the cost of the program and guiding your policy considerations. And we really do need, I have Jesse and Bob here. Bob Keeley is the currently acting as the director of our data management analysis division. He's a project manager in that division. The director is on parental leave. And the assistant director of federal education and support programs, which is Jesse Roy. He's one of Rosie's colleagues in that division. To try to answer some questions, I know that you're coming up on time, but I will just say that currently speaking, the Agency of Education, we don't support the universal meals provision this year for those reasons.
Well, let me say this about that. This weekend, I got our annual school report book. In the town of Troy, we have 130 kids. How many employees do you think we have at the schoolhouse? 49. So if you guys really want to analyze your costing, your spending and how much it's costing, and worried about your school budgets and school taxes, you ought to maybe look at the number of employees in all these schools. And I think that I think it's more important to feed the kids than it is to employ an extra 5 or 8 people at the schoolhouse. But and I spent 21 years on the school board, so I know a little bit about employment of school personnel. But if you've got 49 adults working with 130 kids, maybe that's the case where you have too many employees so that one doesn't know what the other's doing, and maybe that could be looked at. And then we could probably afford to feed the children and take care of it without raising a lot of new money. Chris?
If you don't mind, Senator, and with all due respect, I think what you raised, it sort of it actually is a very good underline of what has us concerned. One of the things that we're recommending, and we have it in our written testimony, but I would suggest is that you ask your colleagues down the virtual hall, as it were, in the Senate Education Committee, to take testimony on this and to take up the bill, because there are this bill, and we've discussed this before in previous sessions when we cover universal meals. It's sort of inextricably linked to a lot of other education programs, and it's also on the local level linked to those education spending decisions that you just referenced. So from our perspective as the state education agency, the data issue is really of critical importance because we pull down millions of dollars of federal funding. And so it's really important that we have that good data. On the local level, they're exactly grappling with the issues you just mentioned, which is, do we juxtapose the cost of feeding kids and a potential increase to our budget versus other programs? And that is, and I totally understand your perspective on it, but that's a local issue that every community has to work out, and it could lead to more fraught discussions. So we know that there are education stakeholders who have an interest in this. We've been hearing from some of them, and we also just know that that there are some pretty complex education policy topics in here. From sitting in on your testimony, there are definitely some very complicated policy topics that are your committees that you've been working through. But we just wanted to note that we think that you should either take testimony. I think you should probably take testimony in your committee, but also it may be worth connecting with the Senate Education Committee on some of these topics, because and we're not saying we oppose the goal, the policy goal. We think that this is very important in terms of making sure that we make sure all of our kids are fed. It's very important from an equity perspective to have this access. The devil's in the details, and we need to make sure that we do this with due consideration and care. And there's a way that we can do this that preserves the data piece, is really critical importance to the state as a whole in terms of education spending, and for many other reasons, as well as making sure that this is something that's implementable for the local districts. So that's why we're urging some caution, and suggesting that you ask the education committee to take up some of these topics, because it's unfortunately just very dynamically linked to other areas. So
Yeah,
that would be our recommendation.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. We plan on sending the bill down to education and, you know, have them look at it. Chris?
Well, a couple of comments. If you all have a draft of how to better implement this goal,
Send it.
Don't be shy, and it would seem very disingenuous for you to wait in the process to offer that to a different committee. But I just want to say, I do think there's an equity issue. I do think we've done an exceptional job, and Rosie deserves a lot of credit, and probably others that work with you all, on responding to the pandemic by guaranteeing food access. I've seen it all around my district. I've seen it in my own kids' schools. It is working. We've also seen really clear data that says that hunger and food insecurity is climbing. Yeah. And instead of being 1 out of 10 families, it's 1 out of 3 or 4. And that is not going to go away. When the governor lifts the emergency order and we get to go hang out with friends and family and get back to a more normal social life, we are going to leave a whole lot of families on the sidelines. And by the way, they're the same families that are going to have serious catch-up work to do in the academic sphere and in the mental health sphere. And I cannot fathom for 1 second why we would face a crisis, maybe it's next September in our schools, of mental health and academic rigor and not understand that food security is essential to helping address those setbacks. And it's frankly unfathomable to me that we're not sitting around the virtual table and saying, how are we going to do this? But we're now weeks into discussing this and hearing that the agency is a little uncomfortable with some of the strategies. Tell us what to do. Tell us how to get to yes. And tell our friends down the hall, they share a lot of our goals, and we, of course, will do due diligence. Nobody wants to make it hard on you. But there is an incredible opportunity here. And the fact that you're not bringing forward suggestions of how to better accomplish this is really distressing to me. And we don't have much time because of the nature of the legislative schedule. But shame on us if we don't give this our full attempt. And so I welcome your edits to our proposal and look forward to working together to meet these important goals.
Yeah, this is our at least third year working on this, if not more. And, you know, it seems to fall on deaf ears in some places, but we're going to get this accomplished. But anyways, we've got another meeting in about 10 minutes, some of us, and Jim, when do you think you could get the revised language?
Oh, I can have it today. I can have it for you tomorrow.
So tomorrow morning we could look at that again?
Sure, yep.
And Ted, if you know, you're more than welcome to come back tomorrow morning. We would probably have some time at between 9:30 and 9:45. I think we've got 45 minutes to an hour in there that we could, you know, hear more testimony if you had some other folks that wanted to weigh in. So if that would if that'll work for you, you're more than welcome to come back. Yeah, probably 9:45 or something like that. 9:30 to 9:45.
I'm sorry, Senator, I don't have my schedule in front of me, but I will I'll connect with Linda
Sure.
and see if
Yeah.
we can be available. I know the time is short. I will just say to Senator Pearson's comment, we share the urgency of this. That being said, you know, it is very technically complicated. So we want to make sure that we're moving forward. And I will say I was hoping to have more time to go over this, but we've been working, and the reasons why I brought Bob and Jesse today is we've been working internally on the data question for about 8 months now. That work is not finished, but we are burning towards trying to get a permanent long-term solution for the data issue so that we can move forward on this. So we're at the table, but we do want to make sure that it's done right, because there are some significant risks that have nothing to do with the very worthy policy goal. Putting the cost issues aside.
Anything else from any of the committee members? And as far as the guests are concerned, you're all, you know, welcome back tomorrow if you can make it. Sorry we ran out of time today, but we have one item first thing at 9 on ecosystems, and that shouldn't take long, and then we'll move back on to this issue. So with that, I guess we'll adjourn and